Okay, today is September 10th, 2019. This is a meeting of the Acushnet Board of Selectmen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Apparently they moved our flag.
Right there. So you want it right there. Okay, the consent agenda for the meeting has been previously distributed. Is there a motion on the agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
And
Is there
I'll
a
second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There are no minutes. First item of business is meeting mail. We have a letter of interest to be appointed to the Agricultural Commission by Mr. Pereira.
I move the board appoint Mr. Pereira as a member of the Agricultural Commission until May 1st, 2020, as presented.
And I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Pereira, for your interest. We need residents to step up and become active in government. So if residents of Acushnet, if there's anything that I don't know what camera to look at. If there's anything that interests you in the town, you'd like to be appointed, or you're interested in participating, we'd welcome your involvement. Next item is the annual watershed ride, which is October 6th, 2019. That's Coalition for Buzzards Bay. That's been done. I can't find that letter here. I read it, but that's been done in the past. This is not the first time that's been done, is my understanding. It's been approved by the police chief and fire chief, so they've reviewed the plans for the event and they're comfortable supporting it. Any motion on that?
I move to the board approve the 13th annual Buzzards Bay Watershed Ride on October 6th,
Second.
2019.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, back to the agenda. Okay, we have an appointment at 5:05 with Darren Klein of Copeland and Page. He's stuck in traffic. He is en route, and we are going to defer that to further on in the meeting. It's almost 5:05. He should be here by 5:30, so we'll defer that for a little while. Under old business, golf committee empowerment policy. I attended the golf committee meeting on Thursday. They were given the policy at that point. They'd like some time to review it and, potentially suggest changes to it, if any. But they just thought it was some of them were seeing it for the first time. They wanted more time to review it, so they're going to review it. We'll put it back on the agenda at some future time. So could I get a motion to table this at this point in time?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes. We'll bring this on the agenda, I would suspect, within the month. Remote participation policy, back again for a second reading. Any discussion on this, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I just making sure that the Miss Julie Hebert, our interim town administrator, is with us tonight, and I just want to make sure that if the board votes this, that everybody understands it's only members of a public body that can do this. So you can't have somebody else from outside trying to remotely tie into your meeting. It's only for members of the public body. So if one of us were absent, we'd be able to tie in remotely. Somebody from the finance committee couldn't make it, but they had the opportunity to tie in remotely because they're at work late or whatever it could be, and they have some time. So I think it just needs to be stressed to any committees, boards and committees that we have in town, that it's only a member of public body. You can't invite Sherlock Holmes to come in and be on the internet webinar,
Mr. DeRoche, anything?
and for good reasons.
Okay, I read it over and I'm okay with it.
I mean, my first reaction, if you remember last week, I said, yeah, this, I didn't like the idea of this for the Board of Selectmen, but as I've read it and considered it, I think it could apply to us as well. I think this is a good idea for us under unusual circumstances. If one of us could not be here and wanted to participate remotely, I think it's fine. As I read this, it's got to be extraordinary circumstances. It can't be all the time. But if you've got people that want to participate in the meeting, but they can't be at the meeting and specifically personal illness, personal disability, emergency, military service, or geographic distance. This defines the parameters under which they could participate remotely. So I'm fine with it as well. I think we should adopt it for the town, and probably a second vote to adopt it for us.
We have done it in the past.
We have.
I want to say back, maybe about 5 to
Yeah.
7 years ago, Les Dakin was a former selectman, and he had some health issues, and we did remote policy at that point. I think we just did it on a meeting-to-meeting basis, but with the policy, then that kind of gives you a little more, you know, to
I think
go-
this is pretty
go
well
through.
done. I
Yeah.
think it
Yeah,
defines
it
the
is.
parameters. and-
It is, it reminded me of exactly
Yeah.
the situation Ms. Lynn is reminding us of, and I think I brought that up last time to the board as well. It was a selectmen's meeting, we did it, so, you know.
So could I get a motion? We've got a suggested motion. Could I suggest that this motion also, when we're voting it that we're adopting it for our own use as well with that same vote, and maybe we could disseminate it to the various boards in town and let them know we've adopted it. And that, you know,
Did, before Ms. Noble left, didn't he say that they would have to adopt it individually as well?
Yes.
and
So we're adopting it for
Yes.
us, then we would have to.
and giving them the adoption.
The rights
if
to
they want
adopt, if they,
yeah.
if they prefer.
If they choose not to, they don't have to.
That's fine.
Right. If they
Yep.
choose not to, they don't
But
have
if
to.
they choose to adopt it, it's that policy that you're voting on
Yeah,
right
it would
now.
be this. So,
Yep.
go ahead.
Okay, I move the board to adopt the remote participation policy as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we're adopting it for ourselves as well, correct, gentlemen?
Mhm. Correct.
That's our
Correct.
understanding.
Correct.
Perfect, that gives you the right idea. Okay. Chief, Public Protection Classification Program results. Fire Chief Gallagher, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, gentlemen. Ms. Hebert, Ms. Leonard, good evening. I have some good news to share with you and with the residents of the town of Acushnet. The Insurance Services Office, also called the ISO, is a pretty important entity if you are a business paying commercial insurance or a homeowner paying homeowners insurance, which is pretty much everyone. They are an independent company that serves the insurance providers and regulators and municipalities by providing information about risk and how those risks should be insured. So every homeowner, commercial property, or owner in Acushnet is impacted by the ISO. A community's investment in its fire mitigation, its fire suppression activities, is often considered by these folks to be a predictor of future fire loss. So they have a keen interest in a community's fire service. The ISO uses a fire suppression rating schedule based on a survey of 3 key components: emergency communications, water supply, and fire department operations. They conduct an analysis of a survey, and that leads to a public protection classification. That classification is given a number. 1 is the best, 10 is the worst. So imagine a community with no fire protection systems whatsoever. They would be a 10. They're not even, those communities aren't even insurable, while communities that have fully staffed fire services, plenty of hydrants, excellent communication systems are given a 1. That number is then used by individual insurance companies to help determine what the individual rates are that homeowners and commercial properties will pay. The ISO conducts a survey. The last survey was in 1999 in Acushnet, 10 years ago. And we were rated a class 5, smack dab in the middle. So for the last 10 years, your insurance rates were based upon that classification determined by the ISO. Prior surveys, and this is from my memory, Acushnet has been a 5 for a very long period of time, in excess of the 10 years since the last survey. So based on a couple of factors, I requested that the ISO come back to town. They did so in June, and they conducted a full-blown survey. And we just received notification that effective December 1st of this year, Acushnet's classification has been downgraded to a 4, which is a good thing. Actually, we are only 1.42 points away from being a classification number 3, which would be even more significant. When we were at a 5, we were in the top 53% of communities in the United States. At a 4, we're in the top 30% of communities. And if we get it to a 3, if we find that 1.42% more, we will be at a 3, which would put us in the top 13% of communities across the country, as far as the ISO rating is concerned.
Oh, we're top 30 now.
We're in the top 30 now, correct.
That's pretty good to me.
So the improvement, the movement, is the result of an awful lot of work by an awful lot of people over the last 10 years. The improvements made to the water distribution system in the town has led to this reclassification. More water mains equal more fire hydrants, which the ISO loves. And I know that as we move forward, whenever the DPW and I talk about the water projects that you gentlemen are considering for the future, I get excited because, as I said, more water mains equal more hydrants, and that's always a good thing. The second area is enhanced emergency communication. When you decided to build a new police station, you took the advice to build a communication center there up to the current standards and regulations. That had a big role in this revised number. And for the fire department, we took a hit every single survey for not having a ladder truck. This year when they came to town, we did. We received credit for that. We received credit for more formalized training. We received some additional points for the relocation of the assets that we have now, and the pumper down at Station 3 along with the ambulance. Our record keeping has increased some points, and a lot of this is because of the merger of the two departments. We now have the ability to have fire apparatus spread over the 3 kind of geographical areas of town, and that was taken into consideration. So there's, I don't believe you received a copy of it, although I'll make sure that Ms. Hebert gets a copy also over to the police chief and to the DPW, is the blueprint for the future for us. It breaks down each classification point and how we can do better. So we only have 1.42% defined, and I'm sure in the next 5 years, the ISO will be doing a follow-up in the next 5 years. We should be able to find that. In fact, that's my goal moving forward, is to find that 1.42%, so that we will have gone from a rating of 5 to a rating of 3, potentially, within the 2 survey cycles.
But we've got the 4's done.
4 is a done deal. That's effective December 1st.
The letter we were given is not a confusing letter.
It is.
I'll say that. So
Yeah.
it's addressed to...
Correct.
and-
Right.
Several
but,
town
you know, it says
administrators ago.
Acushnet Fire Station 3 is not recognized.
Yes,
So it's,
I challenged them on that, and they...
do we have a Station 3?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And they were under the impression that it was simply a ambulance station. They weren't aware that the engine has been assigned there.
So
and
that
the
we
staff there.
call, this is 1
1, 2 is way up in the north end, and 3 is here on Middle Road.
and 3, okay. all right.
So I did ask pretty vehemently if they would consider opening up the survey again and correcting that error.
Okay.
And I was told that they would, but it wouldn't move the needle, that would impact engine company allocation, and we're already at the maximum number of points
So
for
they're
that,
saying they don't recognize it because there's no fire equipment there? Is that what they're...
which is an error on their part.
Is there fire equipment?
Yes. Yep.
How long ago was this done by ISO, though? I mean, how many
June.
months? So it was kind of, while we
We were
were
a little bit
working on
correct.
integrating the budget, the
Right.
EMS fire department into one budget, under one umbrella, outside of civil service and things of that nature, so they would not know that at that
So
point.
everything took effect, Mr. Gasper, July 1st. So we consider that our official birth date of the merged department. So anything that happened prior to that can be forgiven.
Right.
But I did make the call to see if that would move us to 1.4%. Unfortunately, no, but
Chief, what do we keep at 3? What do we keep?
we have the staffed ambulance with 2 personnel there in engine 1, which is a regular pumper,
It is, okay.
1,000 gallons of water. And we've been very fortunate that on any initial fire calls, we have an engine rolling from Station 1 and Station 2 immediately. I'm sorry, Station 3 immediately. And that was not planned.
I was gonna say, why is it every time you're in one of our meetings, an engine's rolling out by the
Key in the
town
mic
hall?
on the side.
Huh?
Yeah, that's an ambulance heading to.
Well, I think it's also important because of the condition of Hamlet Street. We have a truck on that side of the bridge to respond immediately.
Right. We ran into that problem the last time when the bridge down here was closed for a period of time. We'd have to go down Hope Street to New Bedford to loop around. So now, before anyone goes and spends their savings on their fire insurance, it's been explained to me. I asked a few local insurance representatives what this means, and they can say with great confidence it means that your homeowner's insurance, the fire protection, fire slice of the pie, should not increase. And it more than likely will decrease, but they're just not comfortable saying what percentage, because that's a function of so many other factors, and there's so many different insurance agencies that will develop their own policy.
But it's a factor. It
We're
can't-
moving in the
can't
right
hurt.
direction.
It can't hurt.
Exactly, we're moving in the right direction. And it's also, gratifying to see all these efforts that we've made over the years be recognized in a way that benefits the people of Acushnet. So it's good news.
Gentlemen, anything else?
Great work, I mean, for everybody.
By
right?
many, by many people.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
I'll let you know how much I get off my insurance policy. I actually have a family member in the insurance business,
There you
so
go.
I'll bring that up to her.
Great, thank you.
Take care.
Next item on the agenda is Department of Public Works, Water and Sewer Rate Setting Approval. Kathy Silva's here from the Department of Public Works. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. Talk about water and sewer rates again. Last year, we didn't increase water. We talked about it, we thought maybe we should, but we did not. So I want to talk about water first. The package you guys have, the third page in, references your undesignated fund balance. That's the money that's in the water surplus account. It's not designated to be spent on anything, so in case of an emergency, that's the money we can spend. We have a little over $1 million, $1,080,000 in our water reserve, which is good. It's a good number. That's good. This year, we added $71,696 to our undesignated for the water fund. If we do not change our rates in water to FY '20, then we would put approximately $70,000 in again. I'd like to see that go a little bit higher because we are thinking about doing, with the road work we had discussed at the last meeting, we have a few roads that we'd like to pave that have water mains that are 1912, 1918. So in order to do those roads, we'd like to also replace the water main, which means spending some of this money. So thinking ahead and thinking the next few years out, I'd like to suggest that we increase the water rate only on the first tier and only by 40 cents, which would give you $125,000 approximately in your water surplus. That would mean only an average at the most $6 on a water bill if they hit $1,500 in the first tier, in a quarter.
Our water rate, if I'm interpreting this correctly, in the last 5 years, our water rates from New Bedford have gone up about $1 a unit. Is that accurate?
Past 4 years, it's $1.05. I come
Yes.
from Mr. Cabral so close. Yep.
And
Yes.
we've not moved ours, so we've absorbed that, and
Correct. They've increased theirs almost 10% from 17, 18, and 19, and then this year they increased it 1.5%. We have not increased it at all.
we've absorbed that in our budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, back to you.
So my recommendation is to just increase just the first tier. So you're only the first 0 to 1,500 cubic feet are being affected, which means at the most, if everybody hit 1,500, which a lot of our residents do not, that's only $6 per quarter going up on the bill. A lot of our residents are in the older generation, and they use between, around 500, which is the minimum. So you're talking $2. That's all they'd be impacted.
No, go ahead, Mr. Gasper, yes.
Kathy, great work. I've sat down with Ms. Silver and Mr. Menard and trying to refresh my memory on all of this and getting back into the trick of doing, but with the tier rates a little bit different. So our first tier represents when we set the first tier, when we went to the first year of tiers, it's 65%, the 0 to 1,500. Our water users, that represents 65% of our water users, so we're moving 40 cents on that, and again, we haven't done it in 5 years.
Right.
As you said before, Mr. Cabral, it's like $1.05 over the last 4. I think I only went back 4 years, so it was $1.05. We're going up 40 cents, so we're only, call it 40% of the total increase by the city of New Bedford. We're only moving 40% of that percentage, that dollar amount. So we have to build surplus. We have a decent amount of surplus. The problem when I engage in conversation, as much as we look at surplus and say we're doing good, the problem with that is we are doing good, and we want our water users to know that, but we have a lot of, I've talked about in the past, and Mr. Menard and Ms. Silver, and in Board of Selectmen's meetings, the age of some of our infrastructure, right? And I think that this board's come to the conclusion that we're gonna do something, right? So when we get to, like, let's use the Cleveland Street that we had on our pavement management plan.
Yep.
In Nye right over here, Cleveland Street being on the side of the post office, Nye being right over here, on the other side of Main Street, going across here.
Yep.
They're both major cut-through roads. Both of the roads are in need of repair. We know those are roads that have old infrastructure, 75 years and older.
And they need
19
water lines, yeah.
Yeah.
And they need water lines. So I think it'd be good next year if we look at that, and we're gonna expend, you look at $1 million, you think that's a lot of money. The moral of the story is after speaking with Mr. Menard, you're gonna chew that up. So the board's gonna need to come up with some kind of a plan when we're looking at the budget this year, and we won't get too far ahead of ourselves with the budget, but to build the extra surplus is gonna be a good thing, because I anticipate we'll be spending anywhere between $100,000 and $200,000 a year, depending on what roads we're doing with water infrastructure. Some roads will go out and we'll do water infrastructure that don't need repair, to be Chapter 90 funds and be retarred. We'll just go in, if the road's decent, and as long as it's 5 years old, we can cut that road if it's got old infrastructure, and we'll just do water infrastructure and then retar. So we should, and we owe it to our water users to correct the old infrastructure that's in place. I'm happy that the board has come to the consensus and agrees that we are gonna move forward with water infrastructure replacement, so we can get this old pipe out of the ground. And, we're gonna see what we're gonna burn up, right? We're gonna do a road or two.
Yep.
We're gonna know what that cost is, and, a lot of people say, well, it's just pipe. It's not just pipe, it's gate valves, elbows, hydrants, all those kind of things factor in. And this, I was actually kind of shocked when I was looking at some of the numbers of gate valves and everything. It's gonna add up really quick. So we're gonna deplete that surplus relatively quick. So we'll be able to figure out, once we do a road, like let's use Cleveland Street, if it's 1,000 feet, we'll know 1,000 feet of water infrastructure costs us 150 grand. And then we'll say, okay, this is what the plan is, and the board will be able to sit down and make a rational plan on what infrastructure we're gonna go after to try to get rid of all the oldest infrastructure we have, because we really do have systematic problems with some of our infrastructure. So we're gonna chew up, in 5 years, I would guess that we could chew up $1 million relatively easy. And that's why I'm not against the raising of the first tier. It's not much, it's 40 cents, it's going to $6. Hasn't been moved since the Board of Selectmen have taken over the Board of Public Works. Kudos to the Board of Selectmen over those years, right? It's time for us to make that move, because we know we're going after water infrastructure, and it's gonna cost a lot of money. So I'm okay with the move.
Mr. DeRoche, anything?
This increase will bring up the reserve to about 125,000?
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. DeRoche?
Nope.
No. Just circling back again, so for the low water user, someone using between 0 and 1,500 units, it's going to increase 40 cents a unit.
Correct.
What's the annual impact of that on that resident?
So it would be
Depending on how much they use, certainly, but
$24 would be the highest
$24 would
For
be
the
the
year.
highest annually.
for the yes.
Okay.
So if just a little thing, if you just take the top number in the tier, the 1,500,
Times
multiply it by the 40 cents, right? And that's gonna give you
And
the
that's the
six,
impact.
that's gonna give you the impact. If you're using 1,500 in the quarter, that gives you $6 for the full 1,500. 6 times 4 is the $24. That's what it's gonna cost, so. We're no longer, the good news is when we took over the Board of Public Works, we straightened out our budgeting problems that we had. We didn't factor in a separate line item for meter replacements. We didn't segregate the debt and interest, principal and interest on the debt that we had, the $209,000. So we separated that on your bill. You'll see that. That's what the $20 a quarter goes to, the $5 a quarter for your meter replacement. So we did a lot of work there in getting the budget finalized so we can keep that separate from that. So it doesn't have any impact on any of that. So it's a good thing. And again, it's 40 cents. And if you want to say over the last 4 years, it's 10 cents a year. I don't think anybody can complain. I mean, we're below a penny a gallon, so. I don't think anybody's, it's a precious commodity, so, and everybody needs to value that commodity, because I would argue that water is the most precious commodity on the earth, so.
So let's just tell me, if I'm using 1,500 units, I'm paying $6 a unit, or is that not right?
All right,
No,
so
that's just the increase.
you're going to $6 for 100 cubic feet,
Per 100 cubic feet?
yes. So
So
if
if
you
I'm
take
using
$1,500,
if I'm
divide
using
1,500 by the 100. so that's
Divided by 100 first,
15, all right.
times 6, okay.
1,500 is 1,500. This is,
Oh, yeah.
you got this in cubic feet. When we do the billing from the city of New Bedford, it's per 100 cubic feet, so that you would
So
divide
the
by total
$6 is
consumption.
per 100 cubic feet, not per
Exactly.
cubic, okay.
No, per 100 cubic feet.
The $6 increase, the $6 increase is for 1,500 cubic feet. So,
And we only bill on 100 cubic feet.
correct.
So we have meters out there that read 1, read 10, and read 100.
Gotcha, yeah.
But we always
Right.
round to
So,
100.
Still works, all right, I just want to make
We
sure I
round down.
understood it, because
So
I
if
If
wasn't.
you were at the
All
max,
you-
if you were at the max in the first tier, 1,400, 1,500.
Yep.
So let's just use me, I'm using 1,200 for a 3-family member, right? 3 people in my household, so you're talking, let's just say,
$1,200 a year.
$1,200 a quarter.
Quarter,
A quarter. And your bill's like $90, now my bill's gonna go to $96
Okay.
a quarter, so $6 a quarter, it's $2 a month on the 1,500 cubic feet, so. And that's 65% of our audience, including.
And even out of that 65%, not all of those people hit 1,500. We
Yeah,
have a
so
lot of
we're-
So
users.
somebody using 1,200 would not see the
1,200.
For
full.
$6, it'd be
we
like
have-
$4.50.
We have residents that live by themselves that are at 5 or 600.
Divided by the 3 months.
So that's not going to impact them but $2 if you only use 500.
Yeah, It's $2 a month.
Do we want to endorse this before we move on to sewer, or do we want to?
I'll make a motion,
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to improve the rate increase for water from $5 and on the first tier, 0 to 1,500, from $5.60 to $6 as proposed.
And I'll second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
And I support that too, just, yeah, good analysis, thank you.
So sewer.
Sewer.
Sewer, for FY '19, we only increased the undesignated fund balance by $14,421. So that brings our undesignated fund balance to $276,563, which is low,
Feels very light.
very light, yeah. I mean, I'd like to see at least $500,000 in there, at least $500,000, is my feeling. I mean, we may need more. If things come up and sewer needs to be replaced, that's not a lot of money to have in an emergency fund. That being said, we did, the Department of Public Works, our billing versus our budget, we did bring in about $71,000 last year, but it all wasn't put into the undesignated fund because we allocated $57,000 of it to Woodward and Curran for the Phase 3. So that's why you're seeing a lower balance, one of the reasons from 18 to 19, okay? Having said the analysis for the sewer, based on a 3-year average of what I feel that we will bill versus what our budget is, we would actually have to take $20,000 out of our surplus to cover the budget, which is not acceptable. So my recommendations, I'm giving all of you 3 different ones, 50 cent per tier. That's on every tier, $1 or $1.50. I recommended $1 because if you do $1, that's going to add approximately $38,000 to your undesignated fund balance. Hopefully more. We did budget our sewer charges from New Bedford a little bit higher this year. We had a tough year this year because of all the water. And with all the water, you have the issues, and it increased, obviously, our sewer charges from New Bedford. And if that is caused by sump pumps, we're not getting that money back. So I think this year was tough in general, but we went over the budget for New Bedford. We budgeted, what did we budget, $425, we went over that by $20,000.
That was the previous year. The year, 19, we budgeted $425,000. This year, we budgeted $500,000, a $75,000
Right. This
increase.
year.
But we paid the city of New Bedford $445 roughly $400,000.
Right, we
So
budgeted
we ran a
425.
deficit of almost like $19,000 year over year, and only in the city of New Bedford paid bill. So if you just look at the line
Yeah, it's on the
item,
total budget.
I actually have copies of the budget, but I got it in my head, so I don't really need to look at it. But in the budget, we ran a little bit of a shortfall for what we paid. So on this, only on that one line item for the budget, we covered it, but not by much. And, you know, Kathy just alluded to, and we've had some discussions, Mr. Cabral, you've been on the board for a while now with Woodward and Currents come in. The I&I studies that she's referencing, the $57,000 that, you know, maybe this year we should have held back on that due to the surplus condition, but neither here or there, we're here. When I did some calculations on the budget and fixed costs and everything, I'm seeing roughly a loss of $1 to $1.20 in rate. So we're paying an extra $1 to $1.20 just from the infiltration. Now, infiltration can come from the sewer mains, or they can come from sump pump. And we know that Mr. Menard and the water and sewer crew have gone out to numerous properties along Main Street and have corrected sump pump dumping problems. So in other words, people have had their sump pumps tied into the sewer line. We're not being paid for that. So that's a major problem, because that goes down to the pit on Slocum Street, Wood Street, Slocum Street, and that's calculated on how many pump cycles. It's a little convoluted
Because there's no
thing.
meter catching sewerage.
It's a cycle, and then they base it off 1,000 gallons per cycle, and it's and it goes to more contaminants in the tank, and the more that cycle in. So that's why over the years the Board of Selectmen have had Mr. Menard and go out there. And I think it was the first year, or maybe the year before we took over, they pulled out a grease sludge out of that pit that's down on Wood Street. So the sewer pit where all the sewerage goes to and it meters out, they pulled out a grease lump that's the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. That's how big. So picture all that extra space. So you have a 55-gallon drum, stick you and I inside the 55-gallon drum and fill it with water. It's probably gonna take 5 gallons. Take you out, and it's gonna take 15 gallons before it cycles. So we're paying on cycles.
Yeah.
So that's killing us, and I need to emphasize this to the people at home. You're not gonna do any harm if your sump pump is tied into the sewer line, discharge line in your home. Please don't be afraid to call the DPW and have them come down. If you're unsure, have them come down. We're not gonna penalize you, we're not gonna fine you. What we wanna do is capture that extra cost so we don't have to increase the rate, because you're all paying for this one way or another. And the more we can capture of people tying their sump pumps into sewer lines, we're gonna reduce the amount we're paying to the city of New Bedford, which means we can build surplus, which means we don't have to, in return, increase rate. So you're not doing us an injustice. There's no penalty, there's no fine. The Board of Selectmen has water and sewer commissioners. I'm gonna
So
speak.
we don't want those sump pumps going into the sewer line.
No.
We don't, that's what I'm trying to appeal to the residents, that if you know you're doing it, don't feel like, oh, I'm gonna call and I'm calling the cops on myself and I'm gonna get arrested. That's not the case. We're here to help you, right? That's the message we need to send, is that this board is here to help you and the town is here to help you. We'll figure out a way. Dan will go out there with his guys and his crew and say, is there a catch basin line that we can put in your yard and tie your sump pump into it and shoot it into the basin, the stormwater basin, where it belongs, and not in our sewer? Because I've done all the math for fixed costs and infrastructure charges, and I'm coming up. I'm right around $1.20, where I'm finding as waste, infiltration waste, and that's a lot of money. We're raising $1 right now, so if we could capture that and get rid of that, we wouldn't have to go up this year $1 on the rate, right? So I think it's important that these people all understand. Please call Kathy at the DPW's office, 508-99-80230. Get a hold of her, and that's in the office. Let them know. If you're unsure, let us come in and do an inspection and take a look and reassure you that you're not the culprit contributing to the problem, raising your rates prematurely, because there is a lot of this going on. We did the I&I test with Woodward and Curran, and what was interesting when we did those tests was we spend $55,000 to do the test, but they're only finding $20,000 worth of infiltration. So we're spending 50.
But that's over year after year after year.
Yeah,
So
it'll
breaks- it's a
cumulative,
break-even.
it'll
It's a
come back,
break-even.
but I mean, we're not finding the whole $50,000, right? And then that's how we notice something going on, and they've done a great job capturing some pump infiltration, but we need to do a better job, and I just want the people to understand, please call us. We're not gonna fine you, there's no harm, no foul. We're gonna go in and we're gonna try to correct the problem as best as we can to correct this issue and hopefully save on the rate in future years, because that's really important for the people to understand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. DeRoche?
I have no comment.
So the recommendations, a dollar increase, I mean, the conversation we had before is, it's nice that we've got the reserves we've got on the water side. The reserves on the sewer side are a little concerning, because I think they're,
Yes.
yeah, we can't catch it all up in a year, but it would be nice to get those reserves up higher, because we're gonna have problems. Our sewer lines are gonna need to be upgraded, they're gonna need to be repaired. We need reserves to do all that, so, you know, we clearly need more money in our sewer reserves,
So, and one of the other things that Ms. Silver didn't talk about, but she'll correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Silver, is out of our sewer reserve, it was 110 for the special article for the school's
Yeah.
pumping station. And what's the other one that I'm missing? We got 100, the 15 homes we did there, we also borrowed against our reserves, correct? Is that?
Yes, last year.
So the 15
But
houses that we
that'll
did.
come back.
It
Yes.
will eventually, but it's trickling in, and I think Ms. Hebert
That's the benefit
can testify.
charge, right? Yep.
We got a few people that came in and paid lump sum, but not all of them, so out of the 15, or maybe a few of them have, I don't know what that number is, but as they come in and they'll pay, it'll build out, so that's gonna go back to our
That'll go
reserves.
back to reserves,
So,
correct.
I mean, it looks a little worse than what it really is,
Okay.
right? But there's some money out there flowing that's gonna come back to the reserve, so I think we'll be okay.
Any motions on the DPW recommendation with regard to sewer rates? Recommendation is rates move up at every tier $1 a unit, or 100 units, or
$100 for every tier rate.
every
It's
tiered
gonna-
rate.
we
and
go
there's
on 100 cubic feet.
100 cubic feet again. Is there a motion to Public Works?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion?
You know, I hate to raise rates, I really do, but it needs to be done, as we can see, it really does.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Why don't we take Darren Klein next? Mr. Klein, welcome, Attorney Klein.
Thank you.
Copeland and Page here to talk about, we're in the middle of the process to replace our police chief, who's announced his plan to retire in early November. We're going through the civil service process to fill his position.
Sure.
And we're well along in that process, and you're here to brief us on next steps.
So my understanding from emailing with both the chief and Julie, well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me, is that the assessment center has been done, and
So all four candidates have been through. they've
that's
been
my
evaluated?
that's my understanding.
Okay.
And that's completed, and so now that paperwork is being evaluated by the HRD, which is sort of the sister unit to the Civil Service Commission. They almost operate sort of in concert with each other. The Civil Service is kind of more like the enforcement wing, and that hears appeals of individual cases, whether it be for bypass or for discipline, and the HRD is really the unit that sort of oversees the appointment process. Not where the appeals go, but they oversee the appointment process. So they're putting together, based on your delegation agreement, which delegates or how you wanted the assessment center to run, they're now coming up with the civil service list, which, once it's completed, you'll be notified that there's an active list. And the town at some point, and I know the chief's recommendation is that you do that tonight, you at least make a motion to call for the list as soon as it's available, which then allows you to get the list and begin sort of the hiring process off that list. And I think that's where this conversation is going to pivot right now. So as soon as you call for that list, you're going to get a list of, you said there are 4 people who took the examination and were part of the assessment center?
Sorry, it's my understanding.
So you're going to get a list of up to 4 people. There could be less if less than 4 achieved a passing score. So if somebody did not achieve a passing score, they won't be on the list. But let's assume there are 4 people who achieved a passing score based on your delegation agreement. You're going to receive a list ranked 1 to 4. You will be, you as the appointing authority, the Board of Selectmen, will then have the option of appointing one of the top 3 candidates off that list. Okay? If you take the top person off that list, it's pretty much a done deal, and that's the end of it, and that's who your police chief will be. However, if you take, now we're going to talk about how you get to that point in a second, because I know that's where a lot of the questions are going to come. But I just want to kind of give you the overview. If you take the person who's not at the top of the list, if you take the second or third person on the list, which you have every legal right to do, you have to provide sound and sufficient reasons for bypassing the people ahead of the successful candidate. So, for instance, if you took the third person on the list, you would have to demonstrate sound and sufficient reasons of why you were bypassing the first and second candidate. That would be both all positive reasons that apply to the person you're selecting that do not apply equally to the two higher candidates on the list that you are bypassing.
Say that one more time?
That would include all of the positive reasons
Yeah.
that you are selecting the lower person on the list, in this example, the third person on the list, that do not apply equally to the first and second person on the list, as well as any potential negative reasons that you are bypassing one of the top people on the list that don't apply, that does not apply equally to the successful candidate. So hypothetically, you're taking somebody who has a bachelor's in criminology, a master's degree in criminal science, okay? Criminal justice, rather. And the top two candidates, one has an associate's degree, the other has a bachelor's degree. As a reason why you're taking the third candidate, you could say he or she has an advanced education that does not apply equally to the two higher candidates. And again, these are complete hypotheticals. I don't even know the names of the individuals,
Right.
so I don't want to cast any aspersions. But let's just say the top person on the list had been suspended for 5 days at work. Okay, that would be a negative reason on why you're bypassing the top candidate that doesn't apply equally in this hypothetical to the person you're selecting. So, what's the board's role at this point? Well, you have a big role, and that is you're making the final decision. Typically, you would ask for a recommendation from either your chief administrative officer or the head of the department. Again, you don't have to accept that recommendation, but it is usually done. It doesn't have to be done, but it is sort of typical part of the process. You would want, sort of the expertise of the either the chief administrative officer in conjunction with the police chief, or would be the head of the department. So you can ask for a recommendation. You can also conduct interviews of all of the candidates. Again, all of the candidates are eligible. If the fourth person on the list you can't reach, there's no reason to interview that person. The only thing I would say, and maybe I should have said this sooner, is if you do bypass somebody, when I say the word bypass, I mean you're selecting somebody lower on the list, and they do have a right to appeal. There's nothing in the rules anywhere that says you can't do that even after an assessment center. But they're pretty upfront that they look at bypasses after assessment centers with a little bit more critical eye. And the reason they do that is they say that a lot of the subjective reasons that an appointing authority such as yourself might use to select somebody, good interview, for one. Education, just the type of personality you're looking for. That is supposed to be recognized in the assessment center that's been developed, more so than the typical civil service exam. So they just kind of look at it a bit more critically in that, boy, you went through this whole long process. You decided not to go with the traditional civil service
And then you
process,
picked number 4.
yet you're still adding a level of subjectivity. Now that being said, you still are allowed to do that, and it does happen. But I would say it's almost like a little bit of an extra burden you're going to have to satisfy that you wouldn't if it was just a traditional civil service examination. For instance, education, you've already assigned in coming up with that list, you've already assigned a score to education. So if you come up and say, well, we took the third person on the list because of his education, it doesn't mean you're going to lose, but they're going to say, but wasn't that already recognized? Well, it was already recognized in coming up with the list. You went through great detail in coming up with a delegation agreement to decide exactly how heavily that was going to be weighed. You just need to really, I would say that you just have a little bit higher burden with an assessment center to not pick the highest person. But, it is not uncommon, especially for a position like police chief. It wouldn't be uncommon if it was a patrol officer or a sergeant, but especially for a position like police chief, which is such an important position. I mean, it would be uncommon for you not to want to do an interview of either the top candidate or all three of the people who are eligible, because this is a critical position in the town, obviously.
Attorney Klein, do you feel the need, we talked about submitting questions and having questions, and they'd all get the same questions
Yes.
from us, certainly. Should you review those questions before?
I'd be happy to review.
Do you need to?
I think it's good. I think it's good to have them reviewed.
Okay.
I mean,
All right, fine.
you know, in the end, you can disagree. You know, that's going to be attorney-client privileged. Nobody's going to see my comments or revisions other than the board. But I think it's good just because maybe I'll catch something. Say, you know,
You shouldn't ask that.
you shouldn't ask that. Or maybe I'll have an idea of something that you should ask that you might think is a good idea.
Yeah.
So and it is attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Gasko.
I kind of made a little template before
Go.
I came in here, so it's just like questions for the chief's position. I mean, pertaining to questions, so we could ask things of budget in nature, or budget and administrative questions, right?
Sure.
And I wrote down council examples, so you could give us some examples of that. We could surely give you a small list of questions, maybe.
Sure.
We don't want to be here asking people questions all night. So maybe 5 or so questions
Yeah,
to
yeah.
ask each candidate, because we're gonna have 3. I was told, and I thought the board was told, that
Right.
1 would automatically be dropped from the assessment center, because you're only bringing 3 forward. That's what I was told, we were told.
Right.
I think that sounds.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing.
So they're gonna rate them, but number
You-
4 is automatically gonna get dropped.
You won't even be able to consider him or her.
Okay.
Right.
So-
Because it's a formula, and it basically means you can choose from the top 3 candidates.
So you could
Okay.
give the board, you know, you guys, not saying you, Darren,
Yeah.
but Copeland and Page has been through this rodeo a few different
Sure.
times, so you know what kind of questions, you
Sure.
know, similar questions would be asked other way. So maybe you could send us an example of some questions?
I'm happy to do that. I think it would be helpful to me, because every town's different and every board's different.
I think it points the board in a better direction
Yeah.
too.
I like that. Yeah.
I think if you could just forward me the topics that you want to see covered, doesn't have to be questions, just if each of you just takes a day or so and thinks about topics that you find, that you feel are very important in making this decision, I can just help that'll help me sort of shape the questions.
Okay, great.
Doesn't have to be questions, just like, you know, I'm looking for somebody who's very strong. I think it's important for a chief to be very strong in making a budget. You know, just budget, you know.
Right,
safety,
administrative questions and-
Exactly, then that'll help me.
Because
sort
I
of
have some
shape the
administrative questions, but, you know, I don't want to, you don't want to let the candy out of the candy store right now, because you don't know
That's
who's
fine,
watching.
just even a few topics that you send me, that'll just
If I
help
could
me.
just go down a couple of things,
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. So I got number 1, should we have time limits on each question, yes or no? So when we're asking the candidates, so once we derive to certain questions, when we bring the candidates in, we're gonna stash 2 of them upstairs or up the hill, one of them's gonna come down so they can't have, you know, a lead on the questions, and we're gonna ask questions. Should we give a time frame for these kind of questions?
I mean, I think a general one, yes.
Right,
I
I
think
mean,
there should
we
be
don't-
some flexibility.
Right,
I mean,
okay.
so let's just say somebody's really giving a good answer, you don't want to shut him
Right,
down
okay.
because.
But we should have
I
something,
think-
the board
yeah.
should have something, maybe 5 minutes a question, depending on the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, we're looking for this entire interview to be around 30 minutes, and you can kind of, even as you get to that 20 minutes, say, you know, we have
Yeah,
about
so
10 more
we
minutes
yeah,
on
got
it.
right.
three people
Exactly.
we need to talk to, and they're
So-
waiting in there behind you.
So as part of this, you're basically what you just said to me, and I just want to make sure and confirm, I wrote, can we grade answers as a board? So we're going to ask questions, say we ask 5 questions, right, all the same 5 to each candidate. Can the board come up with a grading system for those kind of, for the answers, so that we could decipher saying that this might be the difference? So when the candidates come in, what my question is when the candidates come in and the board is going to ask some questions, like essay questions, we're going to call them, okay? Can the board grade those answers accordingly, so that that would make a difference in judgment? Maybe those 5 questions are gonna be what's gonna judge 1 and 2, why the board chooses 2 over 1. It could be that tight, and we're gonna say, well, we graded the questions and we did it with some kind of a metric so that HRD don't look at it and go, you can't do this.
So, I think that there are a couple different models out there. I think one is to do a consistent scoring. First of all, and I think you've all, I mean, a couple of you already made comments, everyone would be asked the same questions, of course. So I think having a similar system of evaluating each of the three candidates and their answers is important, and that needs to be decided beforehand. If you are going to say, let's score it on a 1 to 10 each, and we'll talk about it afterwards, that's fine. I think some people kind of maybe a little bit less rigid, like excellent, good, satisfactory, unsatisfactory,
Right.
however you want to do it. But I think if you come up with a system that's fine, some don't. I've seen appointing authorities not do grades, just kind of give sort of, we asked everyone the same questions, we really liked, the answer seemed to really stand out as sort of the vision for the department.
Right.
That really is up to you. I think being able to show an objective way you evaluated is helpful.
That's what I'm trying to do.
The
'Cause
one
you don't want to
thing-
get caught in the appeal, right? So that's what I'm trying to
Yep.
circumvent, is that we don't get caught up in an appeal process over a little nitpicking over this and that. So if we make it as professional as we can with
Yep.
some sound criteria, we won't get caught up in that. We'll lessen the risk of getting caught up in that, right?
Yep, and I think though, and this is I think the other key though, if it ends up in appeal, remember too that you need to combine sort of your evaluation with the assessment center list. Like they're going to want to see that list counted.
Yes.
Like so,
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think I think you need to decide even before you bring in for the interviews. We're going to count, our evaluation of the candidates based on these interviews as, we're going to look at both, like 50-50 or 70-30. They're going to want to know that assessment center was still given great weight.
All right, so we do have that flexibility on
You,
doing
you
this.
do have the flexibility, but it can't be we ignored the assessment center and went only on our 30-minute interview.
That'd be we did it for a reason, right? To
Yeah.
make it somewhat
Yeah.
subjective to outside parties, right?
Yeah.
And we're not the professionals in recruiting police chiefs. These people that do assessment centers, the Pomeroys that did it for us.
Yeah, yeah.
Pomeroy is the company, right?
That's correct.
The guy is Pomeroy.
Right.
So whatever, I mean, they have a reputation for doing these kind of
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
And that's
Chief
why we
Pomeroy
went
does
with
that,
that. So it wouldn't just be put on the Board of Selectmen's shoulders saying, oh, you did that because of this reason, you did that for that reason. So it's kind of,
A difficulty I could see is so we get 3, that by the assessment center, they've all been ranked
Yep.
pretty tightly, and we pick 3. But even worse, that they're not ranked that tightly, and we pick 3.
I'm
So
trying to remember too, because
if they're ranked pretty tightly, and we pick 3, I think we could be justified in doing that.
What do you mean pick?
Well,
Well,
ranked-
number three.
They're very closely ranked with
It's a good
score.
I think with the chief
And
exams.
I've never done this before. so-
No, and I want to say with chief exams and assessment center, they may not release the scores. They may just release the rankings. I need to double
Okay,
check
so
on that.
that's
So
not
you might not know the difference.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
We're just gonna- we're gonna get 1, 2, 3.
I think that was in your delegation agreement.
Yes.
I gotta go back and look.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
I have the delegate, I believe you are correct.
Yeah, so you're not gonna know whether it was a wide margin. You're gonna know all 3 passed, but you're not gonna know the difference.
Yeah. All right, that's not helpful.
So that's not helping. I mean, how do we know, I mean, if it'd be different if you had like a tight, I mean, if you got number 1 and 2 and 3 are like 30 points below them, I mean, it's kind of saying something, the assessment center, going back to your weighting of the assessment center, don't you think that the board would more than likely look at candidate number 1 and say, that's really the only choice we have, because there's no way we can go to 2 or 3, because there's such a discrepancy.
So what the case law actually says, interesting enough, and I think it even applies more when you're hiring a management type position, is it does recognize that there is a degree of subjectivity in hiring. It's not, and that degree of subjectivity is really recognized to be greater the higher the position is. Maybe if you have 10 patrol officers who've never worked before, and they're all coming in with similar resumes, it's hard to explain, well, why didn't you just take the top person on the list? What do you see in number 2 or 3? But I think that the law does recognize that you're looking to get somebody to be your top public safety official in this town. And that there are subjective issues that just can't be totally quantified. And that's why I think it is important to have an interview score. But then I think you need to, maybe you think the score combined with this person has a type of training that you just think is very important to the future of the town and the goals of the town, it's coming up with sort of, a very sound and sufficient, I mean, that's the legal standard, sound and sufficient reasons for bypass.
Question, could we do our interviews and somehow maybe individually rank them before we know the assessment center results? Would that be considered more arm's length? So we interview them, we interview 3 candidates, we know they're the top 3, we don't know who's 1, 2, and 3, and then based on their answers to our questions, we each come up with our 1, 2, 3, and then reconcile that with the
Well, I think
assessment
you-
center.
I
Would
think
that
the-
be more arm's length and
You-
more neutral?
I think it's a good idea, I mean, you can certainly call for the list and not look at the
And
list
not
or
look
not
at it.
know the list.
We know the names,
Yeah.
just get the names.
But you're just not gonna know who that top 3 is yet. But you
We
can
don't want
certainly-
it till the
yeah.
end, maybe we don't
Yeah.
want it, maybe.
Well, whoever calls for the list,
Yeah.
Ms. Hebert in this particular
Sure.
instance is
Well,
the
no.
interim town administrator, so we gotta authorize her to call for the list as soon as it's available from HRD, right?
Yeah.
And they're gonna, HRD is gonna rank them along with, the way I got it is 20% HRD is education and career,
Yeah.
and then the assessment center is 80%,
Yeah,
right? So HRD's gonna do their thing on top of the assessment results, which came in a couple of weeks ago, that was held on a Tuesday, it was our last selectmen's meeting, actually. The
I think they have
assessment center.
17 days to put together the
17,
list, yeah.
Right, and there's some moving parts right now, so it looks like a couple of weeks from now, we
Maybe,
should,
maybe even a little sooner, right? Did you say they completed 2 weeks ago? We don't know when it was sent in.
so neither here or there. Nobody knows the scoring except for HRD, is that correct? Not even the assessment center.
I do not think the scores are gonna be, they're either gonna be on the list or they're not gonna be on the list. I do not
Okay.
think they're on the list.
So they're gonna give us, are they gonna at least give us who was number 1, who
Yes.
was number 2, and who was
Yes.
number 3? They'll give us that pecking order, right?
You'll even see number 4, they just won't be
Okay.
eligible for.
But we don't know what the disparity is between 1, 2, and 3, is what you're saying.
I think in your delegate, the way that your delegation agreement reads, and also because it's a police chief exam, I do not believe the scores are put in.
So
Do the candidates get that information from HID? Say, so all 3 of us, let's pretend that us 3, the Board of Selectmen, are the 3 sergeants
Yep.
that passed the assessment center, right? Does Mr. Cabral, does HID call Mr. Cabral and say, you scored 90 overall, and Mr. Gasper, you scored 70 overall, and Mr. DeRoche scored 85 overall?
I think
Do the candidates know
I think
their
the
score?
individual is allowed to request their own score.
Okay.
But not know how they score.
Yeah.
The other score.
I don't
So
believe.
you're
Now, if
90
it's part of
and you're number
litigation, I mean, maybe they make a discovery request, and it's one thing the commission may hear as part of that case, is whether or not there's a good reason for releasing it. But I think, it's been a while since I've seen that dispute, but I know that civil service puts sort of it's something that they don't like to release if they don't have to.
Mhm.
Yeah, unless it's the type of list where the scores do come up, and it has changed over the years too.
Could I circle back to that question though?
Yeah.
'Cause would it be helpful to bring the top 3 in to interview them
Before you know the rankings.
before we know how they're ranked? And so they come in, we listen to all 3 of them based on their answers to the 5 questions. I rank them 1, 2, 3. We each individually rank them 1, 2, 3. Maybe we reconcile those scores at the end, and then we get the assessment center, and
And then you have a discussion. I mean,
then we have a discussion. But before we know, before they come in with a thumb on the scale and say they're ranked.
Yeah, I think there's nothing, I think that's fine. I mean, I don't see a disadvantage to doing it that way, and I think it does make a good argument that you went into it sort of open mind. You didn't want to know.
But they all came in equal, like, when we
Yep,
first saw
yep.
them, they all came in equal. Go
But
ahead.
a question on that is, how would you know if there's not the 4th person is not here?
Well, we know, we're just gonna talk, we'll know who the top 3 are.
Yeah,
We know the
HID's only gonna
top
give us 3.
3. We know the names, but not the
Saying,
rank.
basically saying Julie would know and wouldn't disclose.
Yeah, don't
the
tell
order.
us.
Okay.
Right.
No hints, no.
So
I
it
just-
does actually
suggestion.
say in the delegation, individual candidate scores from the assessment center shall only be available to the individual candidates in HRD.
I remembered that correctly.
Yes, that's correct. We will not, and even when we request that list, it's only gonna come to Julie as, these are your 3.
Well, it'll rank them 1, 2, and 3.
So
But
we
it won't,
need to
say
decide about-
79, 83, 85.
I mean, I don't know, I'd have to think about that.
Think about it, let's, think about it.
I think
I'm
it's
not-
been good.
Yeah, think about it.
Yeah.
You know, listen, it is a bit of a seesaw, tightrope, or whatever visual you want to use. I mean, you want to exercise your legally granted authority and discretion to make the best appointment that you can for the town of Acushnet, while also paying some homage and respect to the civil service process.
Right.
Well, if we pick 3, I'd like to be able to defend that as best we can.
Yeah.
Mhm. Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
God, yeah.
And
And you do, and that's why.
that's why I'm proposing that.
No, I
that
like it.
might
I
be
think
the
it's a
way
great
to
idea.
Do it. Just,
I-
we came up with this person as our number 1.
Yep.
Even though the assessments, we didn't know the assessment center
Yep.
ranked them 3. I don't know what I'm talking about. We'll figure it out.
No, you do,
Think
it
about
makes
think
sense
about
what you
Think
just
about
said. It makes perfect sense what you said, and we'll think about that.
So, and I think the other
Good
thing is,
So, yes, and.
you probably also want to,
Yes.
before you begin to make the decision, like before that discussion on who you're gonna pick, basically, you're looking at the results of the assessment center, not the particular grade, but where they ranked on the list. We're looking at how they answered the questions that we asked. You're looking at whatever other traits that you think are very important. Work experience, job performance. I mean, the one job performance, education. I mean, maybe you have some others that you find, but I think you want that before you bring them in for an interview. These are the 5 areas we're looking at. Assessment center, interview, we are reviewing with the chief your job performance. Again, I'm making this up. These are what you want.
Sure.
Education, I mean, those are the ones that typically, in, unique commendations or other relevant experience. Maybe you value military experience. You think
course.
that, yeah, of course, and that's actually worked into the score as well. But whatever it is that you,
Does HRD do that as far as military, and I thought they were doing education and career and all that? And then do the HRD, I thought HRD would consider military time.
I believe that they did, and I believe that's in your delegation agreement, what consideration that's given.
So we'll have to look that through, but.
So, and again, I'm just making up the fact, but I think as a board, you need to have a conversation after tonight, before the interviews, of what are the factors that you're gonna be looking at to help you in making this decision. And have those as a matter of record before you then bring them in for the interviews. And you can tell them, we're looking at how you did in the assessment center, we're looking at, the answers you give us tonight. We are also gonna, discuss with the police chief your job performance
Right.
and your overall education and background, whatever it is that you think are
And
important.
then based on the
Yep.
essay questions that we ask, we'll judge it from there too.
Yeah,
That'll be-
yeah.
that'll be a
That was the
contributing-
first one I said. I said
That'll be a
how you
contributing
do,
factor.
how you
Right,
answer the questions.
Right. So these are the 3 or 4 contributing
Yep.
factors that we're utilizing to pick the
Yep.
next police chief. It makes a lot of sense. So
Now,
I've got what I
one
need.
question, will you be available to be there on the time that they do the interview, or does that matter?
I mean, the answer is yes. I don't know what date you're talking about yet.
No, I don't
We
know
don't
that,
either.
but I just didn't
Yeah.
know if you.
I don't really
should
think
be
you need me. So first of all, I'm happy to come to any meeting you want me to come to. I don't really think I should be at the interviews per se. I don't think you need an attorney there for that. I think when you have maybe your discussion, and maybe it's the same night, I don't know. When you have your discussion of who you want to select, if you think it would be helpful to have
Right.
counsel there, I'm happy to be there.
And this is all open meeting stuff, correct?
Yeah. At this point, I mean, I don't, they're all finalists, yes. Yes.
So even if we, once we go through all this and we compile the information that we have, and then the board's gonna end up, we have to do it in an executive session to discuss, all the relevant facts that we made.
Can't
choose.
choose, in my opinion, it doesn't qualify for executive session. There's no,
How about if, like, say we have a question, we just have to call you as individuals and say, hey, Darren,
Of course.
I have a question, and we rated them like this, and the board's concern is, my concern for the board would be, I don't think that
Absolutely.
the choice that we picked when we did our essay questions and the way we scored them, I feel like this has been skewed a little bit, and, what do we do? So we'd have to ask you as individuals. and
yeah,
not-
I mean, the administrator could call me, or any one of the
Sure.
individual board members could call me.
Mhm.
That's, the selectmen are always sort of changing their policy as far as access to council, but whatever your policy is, I mean, I'm not gonna hang up on anyone if you're the call, so.
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
I leave that to the three of you, how you do that. But, I mean, individual board members have always
So
been
normally our
able to call
policy in the past has been, usually contact the chairman if you do.
Yeah.
If the chairman's out of town or whatever, or it's an emergency or something like that, and you need to make the phone call, it is what it is. But our general policy is normally, like anybody outside of the three members of the Board of Selectmen, maybe Planning Board, Board of Health, whoever it may be, would have to contact the town administrator,
Correct.
in this
Correct.
particular case, the
Correct.
interim, which would be Julie Hebert. And they would have to say, let's use the planning board. Henry Young would come in and tell
Yes, you
Julie,
would
hey, I
call
need to
town
call
council.
council on this because we're gonna get sued by this landowner because we allowed this development to happen. So can I call him on this? And Julie would have to give the approval for
Yep.
somebody outside of the
Yep.
Board of Selectmen
Yep.
to utilize
Yep.
council because we're charged for every minute.
Yep.
I mean, I've looked at the bills. Every time I pick up the
You
phone,
got a pretty good deal.
it's logged.
Yeah, me too.
Just so you know, we're logged. You do a good job, I'm not saying that, but we are logged for every time that we spend, and there's been some people that are, been a little excessive in their time on the telephone, let's put it that way. So we kind of came up with that policy, it's got to
Yeah,
be.
whatever
I
policy
think anyone,
you
I
have.
think anyone here needing to speak with Attorney Klein would just pick up the phone and call.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I just with this issue, if you give them permission, I know if somebody's calling me to ask what
We
this.
just need to do it,
No, I will say, like, I'm telling you right now, based on the information and facts that we have, there is no reason to go in, I don't see a reason that would,
Yeah.
that would fit into one of the exemptions to go into executive session, but sometimes facts change. Again, I'm not casting aspersions on any one of the candidates, but let's say there is an incident involving one of the candidates that involves something you need to discuss in executive session because of the different privacy issues or criminal law issues or anything. And again, I'm aware of none of that. But there could be a reason at a later date, based on some new information
Sure.
or new incident that happened, that would allow you to go into executive session for a limited purpose. Right now, though, this is an open session discussion.
The questions, coming up with the questions and agreeing on the list of questions for the interview, would that be appropriate for executive session?
No, see, the problem, in my opinion, no. I mean,
Okay.
you're at the finalist, so let's say this was, this is where civil service is a pain in the neck, to be quite frank, but let's say it wasn't civil service. Let's say you're doing a big search for a school superintendent, okay? You're allowed for certain screening process reasons to go into executive session until you come up with sort of the finalists. You're at the finalist stage.
Right.
So basically what the Attorney General would say is at this point, everything you're talking about is a matter of public concern, and the public really should be able to view the deliberations that go into this.
Okay.
At the stage you're at in the process now.
We had talked about, we wanted the candidates to be hearing the questions we are asking for the first time when they were here, rather than, so maybe we need to channel them.
Well, that's a good,
We didn't want them, we wanted them to come in and, immediately react to the question they're being asked, rather than necessarily prep for it. And that's a conversation we had last time, so how do we do that? But that's our goal.
that's a good question.
We
Now,
could send them-
now you got me thinking.
What's the question? I'm confused.
So if we
So
didn't,
it's-
if we didn't want the questions, we've got 5 questions for the candidates, and we didn't want them to, we wanted them to react to the question spontaneously.
Yep.
Rather than prepare for the questions.
Correct.
If we wanted to do it that way, we wouldn't be able to frame up those questions in open session, because then everybody would know.
Well, I think that we discussed that earlier on, where we just come up with
Yeah,
the
run them
questions,
to
we
you.
run them through the Copeland page, let them say, the board's gonna run this through the interim town administrator, Ms. Hebert, and we're gonna say, Ms. Hebert, these are the questions that I would like to ask, Roger's gonna do the same, then Mr. DeRoche will do the same. Ms. Hebert will say,
Become public
okay, these are
records.
kind of,
So,
No,
so
yeah.
here's what I would suggest.
No, yeah, as individuals, that's not true.
Yep.
Right.
But what you do is the night of the interviews.
Okay.
You have sort of that final discussion before the interviews start. Let's say the first interview is at 6:30. 6 o'clock, you meet and you
Ms.
final.
Hebert's compiled them all, she's.
Yep, and you finalize the questions. You may change one, you may add one. We'll have done some of that individually, okay? And you'll have a discussion as a board to accept the questions. I think you have every right to ask the candidates. You can't demand that it's a public meeting, but say, would you mind sort of, waiting until we call you? There's not a TV in whoever's office you're gonna put there, and they would,
Right.
You know, I think that would be a way to accomplish that.
Yeah.
So because it's a public meeting, even though we're doing the interview process, we've done that before. We've held people in
Well,
a,
who is, that's interviewing for a job is gonna say, no, I'm exercising my
Yeah,
public
no,
right
I'm
to
sitting
stay
here.
stay
You
in
can't
if I
make-
want to be police chief, I might want to know those questions ahead of time. Me.
You know, I tell
mean, it's a
clients
big-
this
it's a
all the
big-
time, the open meeting law and personnel and labor laws do not work well together. It makes everything you do in the labor and employment more complicated, more difficult. It's just, it's constantly fitting square pegs into a round hole. And we complain all the time with the Attorney General. I think there should be an executive session exemption for something like this, but there's just not, and it's you know, and I'll think about it even after tonight. If I come up with something that I haven't thought of, I'll certainly let Julie know, and I'll copy the chair. If I said, you know, I thought of exemption 7, which I wasn't thinking of, might allow you to do this, but
So let's agree to get our questions to Ms. Hebert,
yep.
who will forward them to you for.
And it can be questions or topics, whatever is easier for you.
And then you can, out of a
Yep,
topic, you
whichever-
can extrapolate a question.
Yep, whatever is easier for you.
Yeah, the topics would probably be the best
Yeah,
first. and
compile
then
whatever we send to
after
you.
the fact.
Yeah. You know, it could be in the form of a question or a topic that we want to discuss, but you'll get the
Yeah,
message once you see
you want,
the board's
what comes
trying to
back
do.
to you is you
I
want a
mean, I'm
list
gonna
of
go in
questions.
to Ms. Hebert and I'm gonna say, Lord, I got 3 questions, I don't know what the other guys wanna do, 5 or whatever, but I'm good with these 3 questions, right?
Yep.
Because we don't wanna spend all night asking 20 questions to each candidate, so we might just do, 5 or 6 or 7 questions, whatever it is. And Julie will put a list together and, so she can do this, right? If I go in with my 3 questions and I give her my list, and Mr. Cabral goes in with his 3 questions and she puts it on the list, and then Mr. DeRoche goes in and gives his 3 questions and she puts it on the list, she can circulate that to the members of the board outside of a public meeting, can't she? And say, these are the 9 questions that the board has put together, which 5 do you really want to have, and come to an agreement on those 5 that way without being in a public session?
Well, she knew some of that.
Coming to the
She can distribute it, but she can't ask for feedback from, I mean, that's something you're supposed to deliberate as a board. So like, if she's taking Roger's questions and Kevin's questions and David's
So I
questions,
pushed the limit and I got there, but I just pushed it a little too, she went over the cliff, right?
she can do a lot of the collection and she could even distribute before the meeting, but once, she can't get any feedback.
Yeah.
She can't get feedback from you on Roger's questions.
Right.
Okay, because the argument would be you're just circumventing the open meeting law through Julie, rather than discussing it as a board at a meeting.
Well, it says not a quorum present, though.
Exactly.
So I would argue with the Attorney General, there's not a quorum present.
But I think they would make that point as well. I think that's their point.
All right, so we can't get distributed the list of questions, we just can't discuss them and ask questions about them.
So then it would be Julie's decision to pick the questions out of
Well,
the.
yeah, but I think it is, I think you,
And
I
after
mean,
he gives his.
I do think the board, I mean, I think it's up to the board, but I think the idea of having, if you're scheduling the interviews at 6:37 and 7:30, having a 6 o'clock meeting to kind of finalize sort of the process, the questions, I think it's fine, and I think it's very, like you said, you've done it before. You know, yes, it's a public meeting, but we really would like, we're really interested to get your answers right off the top. We want to hear, as you sort of get the questions, we'd ask that you wait upstairs. By the way, they could also stay in for the other interviews. From a public, open, from a.
From an open meeting.
But I think you ask them out of respect for their fellow candidates that they not do that.
Right. Yeah, that's good. All right, so we got pretty good guidelines right now? I'm pretty convinced.
It's been very informative.
Everybody
Very
good?
I
informative.
like it.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Great, thank you. And I apologize, Julie contacted me late last week. I tried to squeeze the meeting in after another meeting for 5:30, then it got changed to 5, so I did the best I could.
No, it's
We made it. We made it.
Yep.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, have a great night. Great rest of your meeting. Nice to see everyone.
Drive safe.
Next item on the agenda is our town administrator's report.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, did I skip something?
well, I would like
Oh, yeah.
I would like to move the Board of Selectmen call for the police chief civil service list
Yeah, good point.
as soon as possible. That was developed in accordance with the town's delegation agreement and assessment center.
Second?
Second, further discussion?
No?
All in favor?
Aye?
All right.
Any opposed? Let's do that.
Joe.
All right.
I will do it tomorrow.
I knew I skipped something.
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping me. All right, town administrators reports.
So the main thing that I have for you guys is the call that we had with Standard & Poor's last week on Thursday. Roger was in on the call. I also had the chair of the finance committee and various department heads. We had the treasurer collector, the town planner, the assessor, all a part of that call. And it was a big moment for us. We've done a lot of work, at least, as far as I've been here the last 3 years, making changes to our finances, trying to make improvements however much we could. And the agency has been watching us. It's something that they monitor all of the towns closely. They noticed a lot of surplus in our finances, and they wanted to reach out to us to find out whether that was something that we were doing intentionally or if there was some kind of fluke, that the town had that led to some excess revenues. So the call went really well. We talked about how the moves we did were intentional. We have reformatted the budget. The prior administration had a different way of budgeting. There were conservative revenues and a little excess in expenses that produced a larger amount of free cash every year. So when I came in, for instance, the free cash was certified at a little over $2 million. However, they were using over $1.2 million to balance the budget. So it looked like they had a lot of money, but they didn't really. They've seen that we changed that, where we're not inflating things anymore. We're trying to be a little more actual with our revenues and with our expenses so that we generate a good amount of free cash, but not an excess amount of free cash. Our amount that we're aiming for every year is those we had last year. And what we're doing with that money is very important. A portion of it has always gone to stabilization since we've been here. We've put over $1 million into stabilization. That was a huge impact for Standard & Poor's on our finances. They also looked favorably on the fact that we made an investment into the OPEB. We moved the money into the trust fund, and we have a plan to put $100,000 into it every year. That was a very favorable piece that Standard & Poor's recognized as well. We went through a lot of different pieces that led us to where we are. I just want to mention a few others. We worked to lower insurance, both health insurance that we saw this year that impacted FY20, in making we added a +1 that pulled a lot of people from a family plan to a +1 plan that looks like it's saving the town about $140,000 this year. We weren't sure what the number would be because we didn't know if some people would come on that weren't originally on the health insurance with the town because it's a good plan now. But that was a big savings. I know Brian worked really hard on our insurance when he first came here to adjust our liability and our workers' comp. He did a lot of work on audits to make sure that people were quoted appropriately in the right department to make sure that we were getting charged the right amount. That also saved about $130,000. The work that we've done on Green Communities grants. So essentially when we're looking out at how our revenues and expenses over the next 5 years, Standard & Poor's really wanted to see, well, how are you tackling the issue everyone has where revenues are limited and expenses keep going up. So all the work that Jim has done on the Green Communities grants, saving us money for the streetlights, continuing to look at projects with solar, that was all very favorable. We talked about the wage and classification that the selectmen approved. This was a big piece for them as well, knowing that legally we're trying to protect the town from any kind of action suit and keeping ourselves within the new legislation that was passed, the Massachusetts Equal Pay Act. The fact that we're taking precautions and trying to make sure we don't open ourselves up to any lawsuits for this, and keeping good people here, having good management is another big part of our score. That was all very favorable to them on the phone call. And the last piece that I have was the special education reserve fund that we created. Another, obviously special education is a huge expense that we have every year. It can go up really high. How do we tackle that? The fact that we have been proactive and made that fund as a safety net for us in case, we have an influx of students one year, that we're not, overexpending the budget and running out of reserves. We have this as a backup plan. These were all some of the things that we talked about. I know you were on the call, Roger. It was a long call, but overall everything went really well. The pieces that we had scored poorly on in the past, I think were rectified and were very impressive to them. We won't find out the results. We should be getting a draft back on Monday, the 16th, this upcoming Monday. So we'll be able to share the results with you guys at that point, but I feel pretty confident that we're getting an increase on our credit. And this is important for the town because we have a good amount of debt that we already have outstanding that we can look at refinancing to get a better rate, to have a lower payment that can save taxpayers money. We also know we have a lot of projects that are coming up. But the school roof is one that's coming up right now. MSBA, we're working to get funding from them. But even with that funding, we have a good chunk to have to pay for that we would most likely go up and borrow for. I know we have a lot of sewer projects that are potentially coming up, a lot of infrastructure that we need to fix. So there's a lot ahead for the town of Acushnet in terms of borrowing, that having this credit rating increase will get us a better rate and ultimately save money for the town. So it's a very big thing. We were really proud to be on that call and hopefully give you guys a good result in a week or two.
Let me jump in. I get credit for being on the call. I listened. I was introduced. Credit what credit's due. I was introduced at the beginning. I think it was important to have representation from the Finance Committee, from the Board of Selectmen, to let the people from Standard & Poor's know we're all part of this team, we're all participating in the process. But I sat and I listened. Ms. Hebert led the discussion on our behalf. They threw out questions. She slayed it, to be honestly. I mean, she had an answer to every question. They went to places that, do you have a capital plan? And she said, yes, we have one. So financial policies which were distributed, so things that she's been working on that they were asking for that we have. But just listening to them rattle through a checklist of things that they're considering when they're considering the financial condition of the town, and she had a response. So the things that this community's been doing for the past several years have positioned us very well for a better bond rating through Standard & Poor's, which you'd estimated could reduce our borrowing costs by 1/4 of a point, which could be huge. So, but just some things that like the 5-year capital plan, I didn't realize we had one, but we've got one. And that was Standard & Poor's loved it. It was and every time they asked a question, and she said, "We got that." They called her bluff. I need a copy of that. Can you send a copy of that? And,
I'm making one right now. Give me a minute.
Yeah, but it was like,
Because I haven't seen a 5-year capital plan, have I?
Yeah, it was just distributed tonight. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
we have one, but it hasn't been voted on.
So it's
But if we have one,
we have one.
it's a template.
Yeah, and here's the
And it's a
financial
working
policies,
draft.
and
Yep.
they're all
Right,
working
right.
drafts,
It
but
is,
they're the
it's-
kinds of
right.
things that
That's what
Standard
they're
&
looking to
Poor's.
do is, they're trying to catch
So-
you, they were trying to catch you, Julie, sleeping at the wheel. And you're like, yeah, I have one of them.
But I'm just looking at the notes I had, and I'm sitting actually in my vehicle on the, weaning us off free cash, eliminating those big free cash bubbles every year.
Well, that's the
Getting
thing,
us
right?
closer
We
to
talked about
insurance
the free cash
savings,
thing.
interdepartmental relationships, they asked about.
Yes.
How do your boards work together? How about the relationship between the town and the school committee?
So you lied?
No.
No, those relationships have improved
Yes.
dramatically.
The school department and
Dramatically.
at least the school, if I could say, the school department and the board have come together pretty well. over the
OPEB,
years.
funding our OPEB liability, they're asking about that.
Yeah.
Funding our pension liability, they're asking about that. And you did really good job.
Thank you.
Good job, good
Thank
job.
you.
Very, very impressive.
Good.
Very
Yeah.
impressive.
And
Very good.
there was a lot of cooperation between not just department heads, but like you said, the boards, the town and the school, everyone working together to make that possible. So it's a good thing for the town, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
And who else, who else was on the call? I mean, but again, everybody was in the,
So I had the treasurer collector.
Mr. St. Jean was on the line.
Yep, Bob St. Jean was on the line. I had Henry Young, the planner.
Yep.
I had Kelly Koska, the assessor, and you.
Yeah, so just, I think as much as anything, representing to Standard & Poor's, that you've got Acushnet, you know, we're taking this very seriously, you know,
Excellent.
Yeah.
bring it. You know, what do you have, what do you want to know? We're here prepared to answer your questions, to be honest
Yep.
about what we're doing in the town of Acushnet, and we
Yep.
want a better bond rating, so.
And another big part of that too is looking at the future. I've mentioned this to every one of you, and I think that this is something we need to look at going forward. Our master plan is 10 years old. A big part of what they were looking at was, you know, our economics and what's our future. So it's great if we're good with our finances, but if the town is going to run out of money because we don't have an economy, that's a big thing, that's a risk.
Right.
And, you know, banks aren't going to want to invest with us if they know that, you know, we have this cliff that we're falling off of. So I think it's something that we should be discussing in the coming months. We obviously have a lot going on with sewer and infrastructure. It makes sense to do all of this at the same time. Why put sewer in an area that we, you know, if we know that we might need to pave the road at the same time, and if we know that we might need to rezone and, you know, do something in that area, it makes sense to do everything at the same time so that we're not kicking ourselves 5 years later saying, oh, we should have, you know, done this in a
Right.
different order. And so I know the train is coming through. Henry talked a lot about this. The train
what?
is,
What
the
train?
MBTA is bringing the train up through New Bedford in the next 5 to 10 years.
Kings Highway.
Yes.
500 Kings Highway.
So we have the potential for more people coming through the town, and how do we want to respond to that?
Do you know that when the train comes to town, that this town will be charging assessment on that station?
I don't know yet, no.
Yeah.
But
well.
I think, so I
So
think that.
I don't know what that cost is gonna be, but it's gonna be a decent cost, because I guess it's more so for the host community,
Mhm.
but any community that abuts the host community is charging assessment for the rail.
Mhm.
So we will be hit with that as well as a financial impact. So it's not like,
Yeah.
hey, peaches and cream,
No,
trains
not at all.
coming, but there will be a cost associated with that, just so you know.
So I think that, you know, working in this town, it's clear that there's a character to Acushnet. We're a historic community. We like being a small community. We like having no stop sign and stoplights in the town. You know, so there's
Stop signs.
No,
Yeah,
stop sign. There's a charm to this community, but that we want to preserve. But at the same time, we need to look at supporting our finances and our economy going
Of course.
forward. So that's why I think it's important to have a plan where we can achieve all of those goals. How do we keep this charm of the small town of Acushnet that everybody loves, but at the same time being able to financially afford
Right.
things and look
Right.
at revenue where we can, where it's not going to impact the town in a bad
Sure.
way. So I think it's opening up to that discussion. From what I heard the last time we did a master plan, there was a great participation. There were a lot of people that wanted to be involved, and that's huge, because you want the town, everyone should be involved. People should want to know, like you said, the train coming in, it's a good thing, it can be a bad thing. How do we protect ourselves from that? How do we make up for any potential expenses that might come along with it? This is something that would be open, you know, it would open up all these avenues to have everyone examine and be on the same page, so that there isn't a shock when this stuff comes through, or, you know, we're all kind of on the same plane. The old plan is 10 years old. It's a typical time to start looking at it, but especially where so many things are coming up for Acushnet, I think it's worth us looking at.
And I've asked for a copy of it, just
Yeah.
to see what
Yeah.
it said.
Copy of what?
The old
The
last master
2008
plan.
master plan? Yeah,
Last
it's about
one.
that
So
big.
I was on
You
a
were
couple
on
of the committees, so I was like, but I don't know if I've still got
I
it.
do have a
I
copy.
I'd love to see
I have a
it, just
copy.
to.
And I can send it electronically.
Yeah, please,
Awesome.
yeah, please. I may have it at home somewhere, but.
You can read that when you're at the concert in Vegas.
It's in Vegas, sure.
Yeah.
Like you'll be paying attention to that computer. So it's great stuff, Julie.
Yeah, Julie,
Great work.
very
I
nice.
mean, and you know, to everybody, I guess, it's
Yeah.
a contribution of everybody's contributions, right? So
A lot of people, yep.
it's bearing some fruit from the labor, and hopefully we'll be able to manage the budget moving forward and keep our finances intact, and we don't have to do anything crazy with tax rates and all of that, and that's the hope, right? Because
Yeah.
the rumor has it, we pay high taxes, so we're gonna see how we're gonna coordinate all of that into one little bundle and how we move ourselves forward, right?
I think it's safe to say that we're doing the best that we can for getting the best bang for the buck, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
that's when we look at things like, you can't control, expenses are always going up, but the things that we've done, like that, looking at insurance and how, some insurance goes up an astronomical amount every year, even in the private industry, everyone is seeing it. How can we get
Health
control?
insurance, so everybody knows that.
Health
Health
insurance.
insurance, I mean, I talked with Miss Leonard, I'm blown away. I was not, because I don't have health insurance through the town, right?
Yeah.
And Miss Leonard and I had a conversation this evening, and I was like, you paying what?
Yes.
So I could, she's paying, you pay 40% and the town's paying 60%. So when she told me you're 40%,
Right.
automatically I think what the
Right.
taxpayer's paying is 60%. I'm like, what?
Exactly.
I mean, there's something needs to be done with health
Exactly.
insurance, and it's not just in the public sector, it's in the private sector.
Yes,
Everybody's,
of course.
it's like highway robbery,
Right.
right? I mean, it really is. It's crushing. I mean, you
Yeah.
get people that are mid-income people, I mean, let's talk $50,000 to $60,000, and you're spending $10,000 of your salary for a certain percentage of your health care. That hurts.
Yeah.
That's a big
Yeah.
chunk.
So I think it was important for us, where that's something that is so costly, not just for the employees, but for the employer, to look at it from a different avenue. We have an IEC board, an insurance advisory council,
Yeah.
a group of
Yeah.
of people from all the different unions. They worked really hard this year. We put it out to bid to see if we could get a better premium rate from another company, and we ended up moving from Maya to Harvard Pilgrim.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, we looked at adding that +1, which saved a lot of money for the town, because again, if you only have one person who's on your plan with you, you would normally be doing the family rate at an even higher number.
Yeah,
But you
the
said
+1 was a
60%
big
for the town.
positive for health insurance this year for
Yes.
employees and
I still kept
everyone.
my son on because he's gonna be 24 years old,
Right.
but I can keep him on till 26.
Mhm.
I still kept him on, and he didn't need my insurance, but I still kept him on because I have to have a family plan
Yeah,
anyway.
so it's gonna cost you the same thing
It's
anyway.
gonna cost me the same.
Right.
Now you say,
But the
now-
+1 now is just somebody
It
plus
saves-
one. It doesn't
saves
matter
some.
whether it's a spouse or a child.
Right.
If there's only two of you needing it, and the family
Yes.
goes automatically 3 or more, right? And the plus
Yes.
one is 2 individuals within
Yeah.
that household, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a huge savings. I mean, I looked at the numbers with Mr. Noble, and I couldn't even believe it. I was just trying to get everybody on board to agree to it, right? So, you know,
So yeah,
it's
so
great.
I think like that, the management here is continually trying to look at how we can get the most out of what we have. Like I said, Jim, working with Green Communities, how can we get things paid for by a grant
We
where.
get some new grant money. We
Yeah.
get some new grant money.
So our department heads are working really hard to, obviously it's the tax rate, and paying taxes is a huge thing for every community. And at least I hope people are assured that the management here is working really hard to make sure that the residents of Acushnet are getting the most they can for their tax dollars. So
Anything else under town administrators?
that's all I have for right now.
All right.
I've given you guys copies.
Selectmen's announcements, anybody got anything they want to announce?
I just want to let everybody know and thank everybody, and especially Matt Lopes, for the cruise night we did a week ago, Thursday night. It was a great success, even though with the Triple E thing, we changed the time around. We were a little worried about the event and people showing up, but we had a good crowd. So I just like to go on the record and say thank you to Matt Lopes. He's always instrumental in putting this thing together. Without it, we wouldn't have a cruise night. And the Lopes family, really part of the committee from the sesquicentennial years, 2010, Joyce Lopes and his wife Sue and his daughter Madison, and I think his son Spencer was even there this year. So we had a great crew. We went off very successful. So thank you very much to the Lopes family and everybody that came out and had the spirit of enjoying that night. It was a great night.
Well, let's acknowledge the Apple Peach people at the same time too. So we got a crew of volunteers in the town that
That's right, we had a great turnout on.
put a lot of time and effort into that
Sunday,
year after year.
Saturday, yep. Yep.
Maybe on one other note, the 9/11 memorial service that usually goes on tomorrow night is canceled because of the Triple E.
Yes.
But he's gonna do something in the morning, ringing the bells at the church.
Okay.
And they're gonna do a little moment of silence type of thing, but we did put it on the website so people know that
Oh, I
we
forgot
just,
to ask
you.
we canceled it for tomorrow. But
Yep.
it will go on as years go on, but for this
For
particular
this year,
time,
right.
just
Okay, next meeting I've got for Wednesday, September 25th at 5 o'clock. So Wednesday's not our typical night, but the Tuesday I couldn't do, so hopefully that's okay.
That's the one
with
we
everyone.
changed?
That's the one we changed. So there is a schedule that was distributed
I'm good, Mr.
of
Chairman.
our meetings
Yep,
for the rest of
that's
the
fine.
year, so that's out there so we can plan ahead.
Mhm.
Is there a motion to adjourn? You can have it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
No second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.